Felicia Ryan Fulbert.
And I'm Iris Chauncey.
Yeah, and we are from the Pantheon Temple. This is a Pantheon Temple show. And what we would like to do this week is we would like to introduce you to some aspects of Wicca that a lot of people out there probably aren't familiar with. So this is kind of our educational episode for the public. What do Wiccans do? We do a lot of different things, that are different from other people. It was really interesting the other night. I was speaking with my cousin's wife, and she, we hadn't really spoken before. We had connected on Facebook, and we were just talking. And, I realized how different we really were because she had absolutely no concept for what it was that, we were talking about. So, Kristen, this is for you. When we talk about like what Wiccans do, we talk about, things that we celebrate too, holidays. And people don't realize that, there's this whole kind of veneer of things that we celebrate in American culture. Sometimes they're religious, sometimes they're kind of secular. Just even starting right off with something like Halloween.
Yes, yes.
I think, people, you talk about Samhain and they look at you and they're like, well, what's Samhain? It's like, well, that's Halloween. People don't think about All Hallows Eve. Well, what are you doing? You're celebrating an old Celtic holiday, a fire festival. It's always celebrated on the eve because everything began in darkness. So it's just, it's equivalent, to, let's say in Judaism, that is when their day started. And for the Celts, that, twilight really marked the difference between the days. So it's very different from our modern day where we tend to think of either midnight as starting a day, which is, to me, a little bit strange. Or when the sun comes up, that somehow marks the day. So, the Celts have a different idea of things. Realizing that we've got the Sabbats, and then the next Sabbat would be...
You're questioning me?
Yeah, you. You know all this stuff.
Yes, they do, but not on TV. Yes, I know. Me too.
We have Yule.
Yes.
Yeah, and people know that as...
Christmas.
Yes.
Christmas,
yeah.
Of course, the Christmas.
Yeah, and you've seen the History Channel's Christmas Unwrapped, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a... yeah, that was a really... good show.
No offense, for a Christian view to explain it, they did an okay job.
They really did. I think that was nice, just because it really is that foreign to people. So, that's one of the things that we have to do, be us and that are open, that are public in the Wiccan and Pagan community, is we have to constantly educate people about what it is that we do. Just like at Halloween, I was really surprised over this fact. That the number one, selling costume many years in a row has been witches, and yet at the same time, they don't acknowledge that we even exist. We're characters, from fairy tales.
Yes,
That there never really were, any witches. Like it's some kind of strange mythological being.
Yes, we're here.
Yes, we are here. They were there then, too. People can't say that they really didn't exist. There's always been people, local wise women and such, that even up until, even the last century, it's been something that, a lot of people might not have considered. But when you have people that live in very small communities and they don't move around, they would, let's say, have that local midwife, that local wise woman, or the woman that you went to who would throw the stones, and she would, tell you what was in your future, And there was once in the Witch's Almanac, I was reading an account. It was actually written by an actor from Wales, and he was talking about that every village had its own witch.
Yes. Yeah. Different names, I'm sure. I'm sure there's...
I know, but that was from when he was a boy, Yeah. And this is
that
going back quite some time. So, there is still a tradition of that, even though it may go underneath the guise, going forward under Christianity. That is something that people have always done. Practices, magical practices are something that people have never stopped doing either.
No.
Yeah.
People hid it or call it something different.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And I think one of the big misnomers, too, and I'll just mention this before we go back to the Sabbats, is that when we are speaking about magic, when we talk about rituals and spells that we do, that's an active form of prayer because we're seeing ourselves as being co-creators with the universe, and we have a connection that we actually try and foster. That actually is really where all of our power comes from, is really through that connection. So we work with different elements. We work with deities. I don't think that that's a real secret. But, we're not actually taking prayer in such a sense that we are just hoping that maybe something will happen. We're actually going one step beyond that. We're trying to work with it to actually create and shape change. So I think that's, when you realize that that's really all that we're doing, I think that takes some of the strangeness out of it. Hollywood, I mean, that they've always kind of had a strange way of portraying things. But, then again, Hollywood, to be fair, portrays everything
worse than what it really is.
Or they do things sideways. I mean, they'll do a story even from, let's say, the Bible, and then they won't even follow the Bible.
No.
No. You're like, wait a minute. That isn't the way the story goes. Yeah. We do have 8 Sabbats that we honor in Wiccan tradition. And that was largely because of Gerald Gardner's coven. They decided that they didn't just want to do the 4 Celtic fire festivals, they wanted to do the solstices and equinoxes. Mm-hmm. So that was actually added in. But they come from 2 different backgrounds. So the Celtic fire festivals are Samhain and Imbolc. And then we have Beltane and Lunasa. And with those, we have the other 4. We have Yule, and then we have Astara, and then we have Midsummer. People sometimes call it Litha, but that's actually a misnomer. Somebody took that out of Tolkien's book. A little bit of modern culture creeping in. And Mabon, which is, it's very interesting that the way that we have the solstices and equinoxes laying on top of each other. One of the key things that you have to understand, too, is it's actually very deliberate. You could go by astrology for the dates, you could go by the modern calendar, but really what you're looking at are places that are marking between times. And, just like when I was talking about it, twilight was when the day began. Those between times are the sacred times. Those are the times that, between the worlds.
Yes.
And that's what we honor, and that's what we work with. So, when we think of, let's say, Samhain, which people know as Halloween, well, I mean, what do we think of?
What do witches think of, or what does everybody else think of?
Well, what do we think of? Just modern people out there, non-magical folk, what do they think of?
Oh, trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
I think that's all they think of, is getting candy. Dressing up in costume.
Oh, yeah, but that's drawing, from old, ancient customs as well. The Irish brought a lot of customs here, and they brought those, too.
Yes.
I mean, they used to go from door to door asking for soul cakes.
And that didn't even happen in America, I don't think, until late 1800s.
Yeah,
And that was just in small little communities where they wanted to have a festival, so they have people going around, go to door to get some food, go door to door to get some food, little scraps everybody had to get together.
That's right, and if you didn't give anything, there was some mischief.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
They might mess up your butter, or they might tip a cow. And then, of course, there's the other thing, like you were mentioning with costumes. Mumming, wearing a costume, a disguise. We don't tend to think of that as having kind of any magical aspect, but it does. Because it's the place between the worlds when the boundaries of the living and the dead are seen to be thinnest. And Dia de los Muertos, I think some people might be familiar with too, the Day of the Dead. It's the same thing. You're honoring the dead, and yet at the same time, there's this fear that goes on with the dead too.
So some people, a short period of time, decided to wear costumes thinking that they would keep away. If they would blend in with whatever evil spirits that might be around, so they wouldn't be bothered.
And also scare them away.
Yes, scare them away.
It's camouflage.
Yes, yeah. They didn't happen in all cultures. But.
No, but it's we tend to not really think about historically where a lot of our cultures come. Modern culture comes from the things that we do, and people say, well, why do we say that? Why do we do that? And a lot of these things, they come from old superstitions, they come from old religions, and people just don't question it anymore. Things like apples, those are harvested at that time of year as well. So many of us, when we're new to the craft for the first time, we get all excited because it's the first time somebody cuts an apple crosswise, because there's a pentagram in it, and it's pretty, it's nice, but it really doesn't have anything to do with witchcraft per se. But there is a tie between the apple and the other world. There seem to be actually fruits of the other world in the same sense that the pomegranate is. So. So a lot of what we see, it really, even though we're celebrating it in modern terms, it really has very old customs that are attached to it that go far back. And then, of course, we have Yule. Yeah. And what are some of the symbols of that? We think about?
The mistletoe.
Oh, yeah.
Red and green. What are the colors? The Yule log,
yep,
that everybody has or knows what a Yule log is.
Well, I think we know about it because it used to be on WPIX every year when we were in New York, and you'd have the little burning Yule log.
That's right. They used to sell them in all the grocery stores.
Yes.
You don't see them quite as often, but they used to sell them everywhere.
Yeah. And
now I laugh, and if I see somebody selling a Yule log, and I'm like, do you know what that's for?
Yeah, actually, our little Yule log that we use in the temple every year.
No, it's funny, when I used to go to church, my father was a Baptist minister, and we used to sing Yule songs at Christmas. And now that I look back at it, that's hysterical.
Yeah, and it is, because some of the older songs, they've got the pagan overtones, deck the halls with balls of holly and the mistletoe. And the mistletoe is a very sacred herb, especially to the Druids. We think about
Christmas tree.
Yes, the Christmas tree. That goes back to the tradition of bringing evergreens into the house.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it was a symbol of everlasting life, of making it through the winter. It's even down to Santa Claus. I have to giggle, when even if it isn't exactly the same, there's archetypes, I think, that we have that in our memory, in history and lore, that keep being passed down, sometimes accidentally. With Santa Claus, we have somebody that's a little bit similar, but a little bit different. There's another Knight Rider. That would be Father Odin.
Yes.
And he goes out in his nocturnal jaunts, and he would collect the souls of the dead. That would actually be the wild hunt. So, not exactly, you're not expecting anything underneath the tree. But he's also, a granter of wishes. That doesn't even address the fact that what we're actually celebrating is a rebirth of the sun. But just in terms of Yule being also a time of plenty, it was a time where all the harvesting had been done. Everything had been brought in. There was no more work to do out there. And it was snowing. You were indoors. Yes. So what better than to get everybody together and have a great big party and have a nice big fire and everybody be warm and celebrate. So I think that's, something that we still like to do now.
But the fire was important also because it was supposed to be a symbol of return of the sun.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The Yule log.
Yeah. Hollywood has definitely still, been unkind. I am grateful, though, for Harry Potter movies because they celebrate witches and wizards. And I think that a lot of people have very positive experiences with the books, very positive experiences with the movie.
Even 10 years ago, people in society think differently than they did.
Yes, they do.
Today, you know.
Huge difference. Even just in terms of things like black. There's even this. I'm wearing black today. I feel comfortable in black. I look thinner. Don't we all?
That's the reason why we all look black.
But it's actually it's a really sacred color. People tend to think of it in terms of being evil, but it's not. When you've got the color black, this is a color that absorbs all the colors of the rainbow, the full spectrum of light, rather than reflecting it. Yeah, it's almost like black is a power color anyway. And I think people, they mentally kind of resonate with that. Mm-hmm. They take it in a very different way than they do a lot of the other colors. So, but it's the connotations are definitely not negative ones.
Hello enchanted ones, and welcome to this Yule tree DIY video. I am out in the woods today and I'm actually foraging items for my Yule tree. Since I've been doing more and more research into a Yule tree, I've become really fascinated with it. Everything's just started to make so much more sense as to why we do this, as to why people brought trees into their home. I'm just going to skip the bit where I'm just amazed by everything and just tell you everything. As you know, a fir tree is an evergreen. When pagans decided to put it into their home, it's because it was the one last remaining tree that didn't have their leaves shed. It was seen as a tree of protection. And not only that, the pine needles from the fir tree are actually used to preserve, I think this was in caveman times, but they were used to preserve foods over the winter, which I'm very fascinated by. It's just such a hardy tree, and that's the first thing. But the second thing is the shape of the evergreen tree. It is a cone shape, so it points upwards. And of course, what was the most important thing to do with Yule? It was the return of the sun and the winter solstice. So having emblems and symbols, fruits that look like the sun, was a very common thing to put on the tree. So I actually started my preparations for the tree on Friday because it wasn't actually a very nice day to go foraging. So I decided to make some of the decorations there. And of course these decorations were in honour of the sun.
So, I already had one of the most important features on my tree already, lights. Although before electricity, trees used to be adorned with candles to honour the sun, the moon and the stars.
I found something really interesting about baubles. Pagans didn't see these as the classic bauble. They actually saw them as a witch ball. A witch ball is basically something that will attract negative spirits. Because the 21st of December and the winter solstice was such a dark day, who knows what negative energy and bad spirits were lurking around. So they covered the tree in ball-shaped ornaments that looked like orbs to actually attract these negative spirits. They would put gold ribbon, they would put beautiful pictures onto the baubles, so they would kind of be attracted to it like a moth to a flame. They would go inside the ball and they would be free from their home. So I thought that was such an interesting piece of information because it's honestly why we have baubles on our trees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put everything out on the table and we're going to have a little crafting session and kind of just make little scenes inside of these baubles to go on the tree from the nature, but also some spices and crystals and things like that. So let's begin crafting.
After everything was nearly complete, I decided that it was time to start decorating my Yule tree. So I leisurely potted around in front of the fire and one by one thoughtfully placed them on the tree, thinking about what they represented, and it really felt so much more meaningful. What I love most about learning about Yule is that everything you place upon this tree Every colour, symbol and piece of nature matter, and through the power of the cone-shaped fir tree, it will point all of this energy towards the sun, and then in return it will protect us, our homes and our loved ones. Thank you so much for watching, Enchanted Ones.